Today I'm going to talk a little bit about two different types of heroes, and these come from mostly from the ancient world. The Greeks often give us our best models, but then also a quick lesson on the tragic flaw and the types of sins or crimes that typically bring down these hero types. So let's start by taking a look, if we can, at the types of heroes, and I'm going to talk really about two types: the hero of success and the hero of choice. Let's focus on this hero of success. Okay, so when we think about a model for what a hero is, often pictures of big, strong Marvel-like characters come in, and these often fall into the category of what we might call the hero of success. These have two principal uses of or tools or weapons that they have, in addition to any like magic swords or bows and arrows or anything like that. But typically their success centers around either using violence or using guile. So the two that come readily to mind from the Greeks would be Achilles, who thrives off of the violent action of war, and then Odysseus, who is also a warrior, but he's one who uses trickery, much like Loki, to get himself out of bad situations because he doesn't particularly have as much skill or as much strength as some of the people he might fight against. So when we think about these heroes of success, we tend to think about them as being stuck within their cultures and their time. Their perception of how the world operates is usually limited to the culture that brought them up. So where they will struggle will be with forces that are alien to them, worlds where they don't understand the game and how it's played. These heroes tend to represent the best and the brightest of the values and virtues of the culture that gives them birth. Their battles tend to be in terms of an us versus a them. And if you are not part of the culture, you are an outsider, and you are the them, and you are equated with evil. Now, these heroes of success tend to operate from what we call a particular ethic or a code of conduct. Those codes are established by the culture. They're not established by the hero. So often the hero will feel himself or herself kind of bounded by duty and obligation, and particular restraints against things they can do and things they can't do against the enemy. Now, typically what happens with heroes of success is they live within their system. An incident has occurred that calls the fate or the future of the people, the community is called into question. There's some danger that's lurking, and that incident demands their most powerful warrior to come and take place. So the hero finds himself taking action. Now, for this kind of hero of success, their legacy, their legend, their name, their future is not built on living, it's built on establishing a reputation. So for them, there's very little fear of death. Death is not equal to defeat in their minds. It may cost their life, but it's not going to yield significant results because they may find themselves becoming woven into songs, culture, history of the people. So they achieve immortality through that route. Okay. Now, another type of hero we have that falls along that line is one called the hero of choice. Okay. Now, the hero of choice is a little bit different. Okay. And what we find with the hero of choice is that this is an individual who often is outside of their culture. They may be an outsider who lives out in the country, kind of like a Luke Skywalker, who doesn't live as part of the empire. He's just kind of on this outskirt planet. They tend to be separated, either intentionally or maybe their family has decided to separate them. They tend to be more self-reflective. So in that, they're not necessarily representing the culture or the society's values. They are representing their own or some outside, something that they've come to knowledge of rather than that's been taught to them over and over again. So they do tend to be a little more self-reflective than the hero of success. Often these heroes are misunderstood, they're rejected, they're unnoticed. Again, they live kind of outside their communities. They certainly don't uphold those community values, which is why they may initially be rejected and not considered part of the group. Okay. Often these characters have episodes where within their stories they become lost, they lose their way, they lose their bearings, they become uncertain, they experience what we call like a nadir, which is like a low point where they travel and they get very discouraged. The conflict that they have, they're typically very strong, they're great warriors, they may have secret weapons or secret powers, but their conflict tends to revolve around trying to find something that's lost. And I'm thinking of like Frodo in Lord of the Rings, who's looking for that missing ring. And until they find that thing that's lost, they can't heal themselves and they can't heal the community that they're representing. Okay? So attaining that missing thing is healing the wound of both hero and culture. Right? Now, these heroes, while they do tend to have strength and brawn, they also tend to be very creative in the battle. They don't necessarily need weapons, or at least not the traditional weapons. So they may be a little bit like that guileful hero we talked about in 1 who uses his brain along with whatever weaponry he has to kind of win the day. And for these people especially, the challenge of the obstacle, the final fight that they have, is often an inner battle. So they are learning something about themselves. These heroes typically are not interested in living on forever. They're interested in coming to some kind of peace of mind within themselves. So these are what we categorize as heroes of choice. Right? Okay, so where we go from here is I want to take a look at different sins or different problems that these heroes tend to experience. Those tragic flaws, if you want to consider them that, are what the Greeks called hamartia. Okay, and hamartia is that tragic flaw that will lead to the downfall, the death, sometimes the destruction, but often it's a death that comes after victory is ensured. But the hamartia is the weakness, all right? And that's how I want you to think about it. It's a weakness in the character that causes them to make mistakes or causes them to lose their footing a little bit. And so we have some typical Greek sins. The most common one that we have is called hubris, okay? Or you probably know it as the sin of pride, okay? Pleonexia is the sin of excess. This is the idea that there's too much of one thing, and so the hero often, and these are sometimes interrelated, the hero often gets blinded. They fail to see that their actions, that what they're engaging, their pleonexia, their excess, they love glory, they love treasure, they love lust, they love whatever it is. Those sins of excess often cause them to miss what they're supposed to be seeing. Okay, often you might see, particularly with heroes of choice, you might see some cowardice initially that comes up that causes an initial loss. We certainly might see that with a great hero like Hector, okay, who we find running 3 times around the city of Troy away from Achilles to avoid the fight. And then another sin we often see is this one of self-restraint, which goes along with excess. These heroes sometimes do not know how to stop themselves. They don't have that self-awareness to end something when they should. And often it's the lack of self-restraint that causes later problems. It can damage their reputation, okay? It can affect their legacy, all right? It can affect a lot of other ingredients for them, all right? And then another way of looking at this is we also have our good old model that we talked about with St. Augustine, and those are the 7 deadly sins: pride, envy, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, and sloth. These are the things that often can get away from the hero and get in the way of their victory, or in the way of them establishing like a perfect reputation. So I want to talk real briefly to kind of finalize things. The Greeks had a term, an idea that they referred to as arete, okay? And if you want to equate it with anything, you can equate it with the word perfection. But it was the notion that arete was a goal, and the idea was to be the best in everything. Okay, And so what we get is heroes who are almost, later we'd call these maybe Renaissance men and Renaissance women, who tried to be skillful in all that they encountered and all they undertook. This included citizenship, okay? This included being a warrior. This included being a husband, okay? This included everything that makes up being human. The goal of the ancient Greeks and the goal of the hero was to achieve arete, and that was high perfection or high performance. So look for that as you study your heroes and see if that is a motivating factor for some of these heroes. All right, hopefully this helped you get a little handle on how to work with these heroes.